People took to the streets of Madison today in a protest hosted by Freedom Inc., demanding justice for Corey Ruiz. Our Tabitha Bland was downtown as demonstrators made their voices heard in a big way.
Red liquid splashing against the city-county building, thrown by protesters who say it represents the blood of victims killed by police. It was one of several dramatic moments as people marched through downtown Madison from the state capitol to the Madison Police Department.
Days like this are very hectic. It actually takes a lot of energy.
The crowd also moved to the city-county building, where some demonstrators climbed to the roof and hung a banner reading "Arrest the Killer Cop," along with the district attorney's office phone number.
What we're doing here as different organizations is demonstrations that we're willing to do what it takes for change.
We need to make sure that folks understand that until we get community control over the police, that we will not get the justice that we deserve.
Other groups are maintaining an encampment on Williamson Street in protest of the shooting.
The strategy of encampment and the strategy of other forms of resistance all have the same kind of vision, right? We want justice for the folks that we've lost.
Last week, an outside person entered the encampment and punched someone inside. Organizers then called the police, who responded and made an arrest.
How does that work alongside the ultimate goal to abolish police when organizers called police when they were in trouble?
Yeah, off the record.
We are told Freedom Incorporated was not involved, but
on the record, I think right now, if people feel that police are the solution and they are antagonizing people who do not trust the police, it is okay to use the police on people who believe in police.
The group saying first, they want community control over policing.
There is real power with the people, and that everybody has the same thoughts, and that people aren't alone in the way that they're thinking.
In Madison, Tabitha Bland, WMTV 15 News.
It's now been 11 days since we've heard from Mayor Santia Rhodes Conway in an on-camera interview. The last time she talked publicly with media was on Thursday, July 23rd, the day after the shooting. For the last week, WMTV has asked for an interview with the mayor to answer questions about the Memorial Zone and what's next. We have repeatedly been told no, or she's not having media availability, or that she's busy. We will continue to keep asking to speak with her.